I believe very wholly when I look at my career, I've been more successful, I've accomplished more, and I've been promoted and recognized more, not for only supporting my boss, but for supporting my peers. And it's years of peers who propelled me and pushed me and made me be successful.
Welcome to Empowering Leadership, a podcast from Dorrier Underwood. Join us as we explore new perspectives on leadership and discover what it takes to be effective as a leader. Here's your host, Doug McVadon.
My guest today on the Empowering Leadership podcast is Michael Braine, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Public Storage. You probably know the company. They're the world's largest publicly traded self-storage company with the trademark orange and purple signs, right, Mike?
Correct, Doug. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you and be with you. What people may not know who are listening is that you and I have had a number of chances to interact, not just in your new role at Public Storage, but through the years at other companies. And you've always been someone who has wanted to empower other people's leadership in addition to your own, and that you've, as a result, brought in Dorrier Underwood and a number of different organizations to work on leadership. So I just want to start right there. As a leader, when you're hired at a company like Public Storage, obviously they think you've got some skills to bring to the table, but one of your go-to moves is to have somebody work with your team. Why do you think that way, or what's the value of that? Why do you have that as a go-to move?
I think that part of being the senior leader in any function, and I've been fortunate to be the senior leader for IT in three different large organizations over the last, 13 years, there has to be some level of, I think, recognition and humility of your own limitations. And part of that is very clearly that my personal success as a leader, therefore the organization's success at delivering technology solutions, is going to be dependent on a collection of individuals, a collection of folks who have chosen to work together. And if I just take from my own perspective, that would imply that the others on that team have gaps in their capability and have risen to the levels that they're at, maybe without all of the skills that are necessary to be successful, or some fears and doubts about how to be successful going forward. And I think very early on, I sort of latched onto this idea that at some level, we're all humans. We all get up. We've got challenges at home. We have challenges at work. To some degree, we're in the deep end of the pool trying to keep our heads up. And you can have an environment that makes that let me step on somebody else to keep my head up, or you can have an environment that acknowledges we're all overwhelmed at time, or we're all underskilled, and how are we going to make this journey together to go to the next place? And I think part of that journey and part of my early experiences with Dorrier Underwood helped me kind of understand that having that level of vulnerability, while at the same time being quite demanding and quite firm in the expectations of the types of transformation and the types of delivery that we need to achieve, are not incompatible activities or thoughts. That kind of paradox can live side by side. And I found it to be a very powerful combination. This powerful combination that subordinates feel genuine care and respect and the ability to be vulnerable. And we still need to get these things done, and we still need to overcome, and we still need to figure it out and rise above. To me, that has been a demonstrated powerful contribution.
Well, it's great that you put those two things together. You call them a paradox, and I think there really is something paradoxical about being both humble and demanding, are the words you used. And I like that you said it in the first 30 seconds, something that sometimes it takes me 30 weeks to get a person to admit, which is that they have limitations. You said it starts with the recognition of your own limitations. And, I'll just say to you, I think that makes you at least interesting, if not unique, as a leader to start there, to say, I've got limitations, and given our results are dependent on the collection of our skills and abilities, we would be smart to take it on like we have limitations and that we've got some kind of deficit in that area. But I'd like to dig in a little bit on what you said about being quite demanding, because you're not doing this just so people will feel good and not feel threatened by you, right? I mean, there is that aspect when you say you want to be humble, you don't want to be arrogant, but at the same time, you are the boss of them, so to speak, right? So say how you balance those two things.
The nature of the type of work that I have been doing is sort of an acknowledgement that something's not right. All of my jobs have to some degree been a reflection of the current organization state. No necessarily reflection on the prior leadership of the people there, but just sort of a decision that we want to be different than we are today. And that difference usually manifests itself in some large scale, transformative, painful system and business transformation. But underpinning that, the technology function, even if it's not explicitly said, needs a form of transformation to be able to enable that, to be able to successfully deliver that, to be able to contribute in a meaningful way. And so there's this sort of thing that's always in the room when I've started a job about why are we changing, and how do we create the safe spot that people can feel good about the work they've done, but really create this sort of sense of urgency, and even beyond sense of urgency, a desire to see things different. The external locus is coming from this need to deliver some big onerous project or restructuring or some other form of working that's disruptive. But in order to be successful in doing that, it requires mindset change on the leadership team, mindset changes on the workforce. And that's really hard work. That is, it takes a back seat. It's not part of the job description. It's not what people are selling, so it's a secondary activity that really is the primary activity to enable all these other things.
So interesting, because you always brought in, it seems like, because there's, as you say, a problem. There's a problem to solve, right? And that you're saying that you can't solve that problem just by working on the described problem, like an IT issue or an integration or something like that. Is that right? You're saying you have to work on what seems like the side issue. I think you said turns into the main issue.
Yeah, it's people, and you can say people are a problem, I suppose, in a negative sense, or we could say that people's way they think about problems is the problem. Or we could turn it around and say, what are the tool sets that we need to provide? What is a different way of thinking that we need to provide to open up people's native genius and their native ability to want to succeed and to want to have a positive impact on others? It could be a paradox, but it's another one that I think has to live at the same time in the forefront of our minds. I started my professional career in the Army, and there was a phrase we used to use there that resonates with me, and it's mission first, people always. It sort of is another paradox. It's for sure we have to get the mission done. For sure, that is number one, but it's never going to happen without an intense or maybe a ruthless focus on the people. And I think that's that kind of conflict or conflict in objectives that creates sort of a third dimension.
Yeah, well, the idea that the people are not first is what's challenged by that, like mission first, but even if you have to sacrifice people, well, in the Army, that's actually true. But you're also saying that it's not either or.
It's a both. And exactly, it's a both all the time. When I feel good, which is, when I'm doing what I want to do, which is not always the case, there is that sort of ability to see people do really know I care. I am involved in people's personal challenges, professionally or personally, and we are getting things done. It's not an either or. It always has to be maybe not equal focus, but it needs to be present.
Yeah. Well, staying with the paradox in the military, because I think it's instructive for people, especially who have not served in the military, to see how you talk about it. You were special forces, right? So you were an Army Ranger. And as someone who has a special forces officer in my own family, I know that stereotype of being tough and hard and, don't care about anything but the mission is just not an accurate description of my brother, who was a SEAL, and his attachment and care, his attachment to his men and his care for that team was always the main thing he talked about. So it seems like you bring that into the corporate environment, right? Where you're saying that you have to be mission focused, but it can't be to the exclusion of caring about the people. That's also part of the credo of special forces. I think it's part of the
credo. I think it's a secret sauce. I think people work for people, and people work for their peers. And I believe very wholly, when I look at my career, I've been more successful, I've accomplished more, and I've been promoted and recognized more, not for only supporting my boss, but for supporting my peers. And it's years of peers who propelled me and pushed me and made me be successful. I know that. I know that as a fact. So as the leader of a function, I try to create an environment where my direct reports, their direct reports, don't view each other as competition, or don't believe that it's a zero-sum game, that their success can occur in a vacuum. For sure, it's got to be a team that collectively views and takes pride from the team's outcome. So I do spend quite a bit of energy on that, and I think that's another tie-in to Doria Underwood and to the kind of work that we've done over the years.
Yeah. And so what do you tell people when you want to do what you call the kind of work we've done over the years? Let's say somebody's new and you say, well, we want to do some work with the team. What's your description of what you're going for there? How do you say that to them?
Yeah, you would think, given the number of times that I have done that, that I would have a good pitch on that. But it's hard to.
I'm testing you, Mike. I'm trying to get it on. I'm trying to get it on the recording here, so I can finally have it. What does Mike say? What's Mike's favorite saying? Go ahead.
It is not a simple elevator pitch. It's not a one sentence word. Generally, clear. I start with some sort of narrative about myself. I may even say some of the things I've already said, try to expose that, this is what I'm good at. This is how I got where I am. And look at all of this area of my responsibility that I'm actually have no experience in. And I'm relying on some of you for that. Right. So I will usually start with some sort of acknowledgement of that to the group. I will also generally sometimes share some personal story about where my own I'll use the word self-deception, or my own way of thinking caused an outcome that I didn't like. And then I'm able to tell a story about how choosing to think about the situation differently has this great result. And that's my Doria Underwood tie-in, because my first introduction to Doria Underwood was a personal coaching session, not group work. It was personal coaching for me. I had achieved great things, but I wasn't achieving everything I wanted. And I had a personal coaching relationship with a Doria Underwood consultant. And in a very short period of time, I had a breakthrough, and my relationship at work and therefore this next level of opportunity for me at work came through. That's a real story, and it's a powerful story about why I'm bringing this to my leaders. And I start with, I think that my work has generally started with individuals working on their individual, I'm not going to say issue, I'll say their own individual perspective and their own individual mindset. And once we work together as a team on ourselves as individuals, and we help each other work on that perspective, then we're ready as a team to move on to how we interact as a team. And so that's how I would describe that. There's a little bit about this sort of intensity, maybe, that the military creates intense situations in a short period of time, which brings people to a point of trust, or brings people through the whole cycle of not liking each other, not trusting each other, and then ultimately trust and some level of mutual respect in a crucible in a short period. We don't always have that in the corporate world. And so I think that these sort of deliberate, intensive work, this sort of leadership intensive work, is what I've normally called the work that we're doing. It helps accelerate that journey of trust and that journey of mutual respect for individuals, while at the same time, very often creating an environment where people have a personal breakthrough, where they recognize a set of paradigms that they have that, may have gotten them where they are, but it's a limitation in their life today. And through it, they're able to have breakthroughs. And in most cases, it's not limited just to work. It's limited to other relationships or other things they have going on in their life. And I find, generally speaking, it's been very, very positive, not just as an outcome for my teams and their productivity and their ability to deliver big onerous things, but also for individuals and their quality of life.
Yeah, it's really great. And let's go ahead and shout out the person we're talking about, Jane Smith. We don't need to keep her as a secret, the one who really produced that initial breakthrough with you, which I can hear was very meaningful and has been broad and deep and not just situational, to that moment. In fact, the words that you choose to describe yourself, self-deception, humility, vulnerability, those aren't the words that are stereotypically associated with strong leadership or someone with a military background, some of the things we've been saying. So, but that's really been your revelation, isn't it? That's the key to being a strong leader is a kind of vulnerability, not weakness, like being weak or unable, but you've mentioned being vulnerable a couple of times.
It's the opposite of being false, or it's the opposite of believing that I'm playing a role. I think for me, it's a positive learned behavior that says, when I try to be genuine, when what you see is what you get, whether it's in a meeting, or whether it's having a personal conversation, or whether it's in my home, it's generally the same person. And I think that congruence makes my life easier, but B, it makes me much more relatable to other people, and a much more, real person that people can relate to, and people can get behind and want to support. So showing that genuine feeling, right, you're saying, is as important as anything, not what the feeling is, but that it's authentic, that's what you, like you said, what you see is what you get, is what we're going for. Yeah. So often. Yeah. So, yeah, go ahead. I mean, people are choosing the amount of effort and engagement they give at any level in any organization. It comes down, I think, to choices. We don't really mandate. We can deceive ourselves, but at the end of the day, individuals choose the level of accountability they're willing to accept. And there's all kinds of management constructs about trying to drive accountability. But to me, at the end of the day, I really believe, I know it's true about myself, and I believe it's true about other people. We are consciously choosing what level of accountability we're signing up for, no matter what our goals are, no matter our boss says. We're choosing whether or not we believe it's doable. We're choosing whether or not we're committed to that outcome. And I think the moment I realized that, the moment I realized my real job is to unlock this level of accountability in my subordinate leaders. And I don't think that it's an effective way to do that in an overly top-down manner. I think that you need to understand where people are coming from and help them choose to be accountable for whatever the task is that you're expecting them to deliver or asking them to deliver.
It's fascinating the way you've formulated that, because I think a lot of people in their jobs would say, no, you don't understand, Mike. I don't choose my level of accountability. They tell me. I just have to do what I'm told, man. I don't know what organization you work in, but I've got measures and I've got people on me, and it's not up to me. What do you mean it's up to me? I mean, I obviously do understand where you're going here, but I can hear the naysayer, listening to this saying, what is he talking about? It's like, we don't really choose our accountability. So how do you respond to that?
I make distinctions in language, and you have to continue, I think, to have the dialogue. Otherwise it's sort of just a statement, but let's make it basic. Everybody should have a right to go home and hang, something on the refrigerator for the family to see. I mean, kids come home from school and they get to hang something on the refrigerator, and mom and dad get to be proud of them. Well, we become adults, we go to work. I think regrettably, many of us go to work and it's a black box, kind of to our family, or it's a negative thing that comes back that we're either trying to shield the rest of the family from, or, there's a negative that we're able to share. I firmly believe that, once again, part of the leader's job is to create moments for people to actually be able to go home and be proud and happy and have a positive, conversation with their loved ones about what they're doing at work and feel good. So when I talk about accountable, I would say I can tell somebody they have to do it. If they don't believe it's fair or they don't believe it's doable, it could be on their job description. But when they're home talking to their spouse, they're talking about how it's not fair. If they're out with their buddy having a drink, they're talking about how they're being set up to fail at work, or how this task is unreasonable. That's not an empowering place to come to the workplace from. And, I would say it's possible that somebody who feels they're being set up to fail, or feels that this task is too big or too onerous, or that it can't be done, it's possible they'll be successful, but it's a lot less likely than if they are coming to that workplace every day, maybe not whistling a happy tune, but mentally engaged that they truly believe this is a doable task, and they feel supported in that task by not only their boss, but by their peers that they work with. That's a different empowering element that I absolutely believe is the secret to getting great transformative things done, to doing things that people do believe is borderline impossible. You have to break through and make people really believe in the outcome and want to engage all of their energy into making it happen, not reserving any energy to second guess or complain. I mean, I've been thinking about this myself over the last several months, and I like the word fellowship. Can be a little geek out, a little Lord of the Rings speaking here for a second. But I would think beyond that, right? At work, it's a choice, particularly at the higher levels. People they have choices. They can go work somewhere else, or maybe they have already achieved enough in life they don't need to work. Who knows what people's motivations are? But people are choosing to spend time with other folks one way or the other. And I think of it as a fellowship. My job is to make people, A, like each other enough that they're willing to spend time, and B, be committed enough to a common outcome that they're willing to suffer a little bit along the journey for the mutual benefit of the fellowship. I got a little weird on you there for a moment.
No. That's great. I think that the idea of fellowship gets appropriated by the church somehow. People say, well, for fellowship in church, it's always appropriate. But I like how you're appropriating the word for the workplace and saying it's a kind of fellowship that we're looking for, not just putting in your time, right? It needs to be a feeling of being supported, like, something's going to happen that's going to not just be meaningful to you, but it's meaningful as a group experience or a group accomplishment, right?
And it gets to what I was going about, is voluntary. I mean, somebody can, maybe it's not voluntary to be on my team, but it's voluntary. People are choosing to be a part of that fellowship. And I guess I would make that argument that the quicker I can get people to self-select into the fellowship, the quicker the return on the investment, and the quicker we get on to, doing Herculean great important things.
Yeah. Well, and that's the kind of spirit that is not traditionally found in the technical fields like IT, right? It's more, you've been in the IT departments, and I think the traditional approach is just tell us what to do, right? And we'll do it. We'll get it done. We're technical people. I mean, it's right there in the name, Chief Technology Officer, right? So just talk to me about technology. Don't talk to me about fellowship and vulnerability in my personal life. Oh my God, what have I gotten into here, right? But you're saying you would get into that. You do go there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that gets to maybe one of the inflection points of, at least for me and what I'm doing, why this is important. I do think narratively over the last 20 or maybe even longer years, as a stereotype, most technology professionals have been successful by, on a positive side, being very customer focused, by having a high degree of empathy for their customer and really desiring to produce capabilities and services that meet the needs of their colleagues in the business. And they've been responsive. When a request is made, how can I demonstrate my sense of urgency and my commitment to make your job better or to make this process or capability better? And I mean, those are all positive words that I just used. How can that be bad? Mm-hmm. But we've been at an inflection point in technology for at least the last 10 years where businesses expect kind of more than that. They expect leadership. They expect thought leadership. They look at how they've spent money or the result of 20 years worth of investment, and they said, you shouldn't have done that for us. We've created this complicated mess. Why did we end up with this? And sort of you get caught in a circular reference error of, well, I did what you told me. Yeah, but what I told you has created this expensive or costly way to operate. Or
so the question comes, why the hell did you do what I told you to do? Right? It's like, because look what it's gotten us.
Yes. And, or you didn't explain it in a way that I understood the consequences, or, on and on and on. So that can be a very frustrating place, particularly for someone who has grown up in that environment. And then all of a sudden they're being challenged on, something that 3 years ago they were rewarded for. It's their best work. And now they're being criticized for it, or they can feel very easily like these other leaders, they're not taking accountability for their role in this. They're not taking accountability for the decisions they made. All of that is true, right? We can just lay it on the table. All that's true. And if we want to be successful, we kind of have to move on from that. And we're not going to win a war by trying to change the mindsets of these other leaders in the organization. We need to take stock. What can we do differently in how we engage with them that, frankly, it increases our accountability? Because we're never going to say again, I did what you told me. No, we're going to have to develop some other skills to be able to have a meaningful dialogue and conversation. We're going to have to explain consequences, and maybe we lack that kind of communication skill in a way before. And ultimately, we're going to have to make recommendations that we're willing to stand by. And I would argue that's actually a higher level of accountability, and it's hard. So that's the kind of change that I'm seeing in my space. That it's forcing I think IT professionals to say, hey, what I did was good. I mean, I always start from there. There's nothing wrong with the way we've done things in before. How could you? Those are all positive things. But it's no longer sufficient. We need to be able to be seen as an advisor, as a broker, as a trusted advisor, as somebody who's ultimately going to be accountable for whether or not 3, 5, 7 years from now, these investments we've made were the right ones. And that takes some adjusting.
Yeah, and so it's not that there's something that was incorrect. It's something that was insufficient is what you're pointing to, right? It just doesn't provide everything that could be provided. Well, it sounds kind of radical to be, bringing that approach into the IT space. However, it's been validated. And, I know you're not one to toot your own horn, but you got the CIO of the Year award in New York a few years ago, working with a large retail company and a major SAP implementation, right? right? And I know that you weren't going for the award, so to speak. You know what I mean? You just explained how your whole approach is to have the team have a sense of accountability that they develop. But connect those dots for me between what you were trying to do there and the fact that it was rewarded by the industry, because there was something that was recognized outside of your organization. I want to make sure we point to that.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, try to paint a quick, it was a onerous task that this organization was asked to do, as often happens to many organizations. They were faced prior to my joining with a need to replace a 20-year-old set of systems that had been, lovingly maintained and grown for 20 years, but it's the end.
Very common situation, right? All across the globe, everybody's dealing with this in one way or another.
We need to rip and replace this. That is an onerous task. We probably won't go into too much detail. We can look it up. Majority of organizations fail the first time they try to do a significant rip and replace. It affects most of the value chain in an organization. It's not just about systems. You're talking about changing the way people do work, and that's a change management exercise on a great scale. If that wasn't enough, we also were looking at replacing e-commerce solutions, also looking at replacing point of sale solutions. And this was an organization that was going through a period of acquisitions, and we're looking to acquire other fairly large global retail brands and incorporate them. That's a lot of things to do. And by the way, we want to cut costs too by a meaningful percentage.
Always.
Yeah. So we can laugh about that and looking at it, it's like, anything else. But after taking the job and trying to put some parameters on and really make sure there isn't anything else, this is a lot. This is a difficult task. We had to have some negotiation around how we were going to resource these efforts. But then a team had to say, it's not going to be acceptable for a year to say this is an undoable ask. And so it gets back to, are we all signing up that this is what's required for this company to be successful? This is what's required.
Including what was required is your relationships with each other had to change, right? I mean, because you had a way that people were locked into their roles, and the size of the dilemma you just presented would mean that the roles would get exploded in some cases, right? Just not even relevant anymore.
Absolutely. And so in less than 3 years, that organization delivered all of those capabilities, managed those businesses, incorporated those global organizations, and met the budget requirements. And that was a very, very doable, but with extreme difficulty. And it took an entire team of dedicated professionals who stayed focused day in and day out over that time frame to deliver that level of successful change in 2.5 years. And I was very fortunate to be recognized by my peers in the New York City area for some public recognition. And that was a real nice event for me and frankly for my team.
Yeah, exactly. Because it did acknowledge the team. It was a way of acknowledging the team by acknowledging you as their leader. But let's talk about where it all ended up, Mike, because, you were flying in the face of the status quo to get that to happen, right? There are a lot of things you had to be sort of on the outside, or an insider operating as though you're from the outside. Right, because you were in the team, and ultimately you didn't keep that job. And it's happened a couple of times where they've moved on from you, the organization. So how is that for you when you have a win like that, and then it turns out that it's not going to last? Just talk to us about that, because I think it'd be useful for people listening to this. Like, who do you have to be in the long run, in addition to you've said who you have to be in the short run when you're in an organization? So can you address that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, first I would say, like any fact that occurs in your life, there's a lot of ways to describe it, and there's a lot of angles from which to tell a story. And, if we were having a different conversation, I might tell these stories, differently. But for the purposes of this conversation, I have said to others, I own moving on from that role as much as anyone else owns from moving on. And I have to be 100% accountable for my own mindset that helped to make me be incompatible with a role that I just had this tremendous success in. So I sort of start from that. And in spite of effort and energy and practice and coaching and focus to continue to try to hone mastery on these leadership skills and these personal leadership skills, I, for one, I would say we all are, but I, for one, am prone to lapses of self-deception if I use that. And in spite of the fact that folks might say I have a highly developed self-awareness, that self-awareness still comes with blind spots, and it still comes with ways of thinking that manifests as ways of being that are not conducive maybe to the outcome I want. And so, long way of saying, I believe that on the same way that we can tell stories about our job to our spouses, ourselves, our friends that keep us from being fully engaged in achieving something great, which I think I've demonstrated I know how to turn that around and to eliminate that. We can also do the same thing around, hey, there's a future for me here, or I'm being, respected or acknowledged, or I have the level of influence that I need to be successful, or whatever other, narrative. And in my case, for sure, I went down a narrative of leaders are changing here, people I've invested or who have invested in me, or that I've had this shared experience of delivering for them. They're no longer here. What does that mean for me? And I definitely allowed my own insecurity, doubt, maybe even prejudicial, negative perspective of the situation to, get inside my mind and clearly show up in how I present myself and create a wedge between myself and other leaders.
Yeah, so it's very interesting, isn't it, to be at the author, being the author of a transformation, and then also kind of getting cross-threaded with that same organization where now your values and theirs don't seem to be a match anymore. Or you're going to, I don't know about values, that maybe saying it wrong, but that it's not a match anymore, what you're wanting to do and how you're wanting to operate. And I'm of the mindset that, and I think this is my own personal approach, is that everything should work out for the long run. That was like my parents stayed married forever. So I had this expectation that like you get a job, you keep the job forever. And especially if you do well at the job, well, then you're in for life. You just like, you did good, so from that perspective, which I'm kind of making fun of at the same time I'm saying it, but it's kind of like, well, gosh, Mike, how could you of all people lose that job because you were so killer and you got the big award and everyone loved you, and so, but I think that's instructive to look into because it doesn't always go that way, right? It's Pollyanna to think that just because something's working out one year that it's going to now work out forever, right? That's not reality.
Yeah. It's complex for sure. Yeah. For sure. For me, I've done enough self-reflection to say I go to work and I achieve not from a place of fear. I go to work from a place of satisfaction, and I always have. Since I've left the Army, I've worked, for companies that I'll say with a smile on my face. I worked for an eyewear company. I worked for a handbag company. I worked for a shoe company. I worked for clothing and companies that sell Twinkies. At the end of the day, this is not, I'm not working for hospitals, and I'm not working for, this is not charity work. This is stuff that needs to get done. But I've been motivated because I focus on people. I focus on the fact that I've got hundreds of employees that, hey, they got kids who, want to go to college, and they've got, family desires that they want to get in. And what enables all of us to sort of have a place in the world is what we're doing at work. And, oh, by the way, the work is asking us to deliver Herculean big things. So if we all want to continue to kind of have all the rest of our life in order, we need to deliver those big things. And I take a lot of satisfaction from that. And when I am gainfully employed in doing that kind of work, I'm pretty much aligned to the organization. I'm aligned to the people. I know myself enough to know that in the absence of that kind of work, I'm going to end up being a weed growing sideways. And and I need to be planning for that kind of transition of what am I going to do next, and not allow the anxiety of that, disrupt the outcome, particularly since I have had the fortune or misfortune to be in the same senior role for a relatively long period of time. And I've had the opportunity to do this kind of work with a lot of different leadership teams and bring Doria Underwood through those leadership teams. And for a couple of them, it was a rinse and repeat. So I was able to repurpose the same sort of diagnosis and the same sort of objective and the same sort of, this is what we need to work on, because it was true and it fit. I think that public storage has helped illustrate to me that life is not a rinse and repeat. Yes, there's some principles that are the same, everything I've talked about, but the unique things that we need to focus on, the nuance of the mindset, the nature of the challenging work is very different than it's been before, and that is stretching me and pushing me to reevaluate that balance between confidence and humility, and ensure that they're kept in their appropriate places. The team needs to be led forward. People want to have a confident leader, but they also want to follow somebody that they know is invested in this organization and truly understands this organization's needs. And so, that's been a really good experience for me over this last 18 months of public storage. It's a different industry for me. I've spent my entire corporate America career in one way or another in retail. And storage has a retail-esque element to it, but it's fundamentally a real estate business. So it's been good for me to have that kind of growth, yet another area to learn and have to be effective in spite of the fact of having gaps in knowledge.
This is going back in a way, but because I think that's the end of that train of thought. But I think that the fact you said 18 months, this has been so interesting. Like, this is me being with you. This is now our current version in 2022 of, I hung out with Mike. We spent the morning together, and, I'm used to being in a room with you and, going to get coffee and looking over and seeing what you're having to eat and, have a different kind of relationship. And I just wonder how that, if it's any change for you, because we'd moved to doing so much remote anyway. That was my initial experience, was it wasn't that much of a disruption. But you've taken a job and the corporate headquarters is on the other side of the country and you don't even go there. And, so is it anything? Is it something worth talking about, or does it change things?
I think it does. And I think it's worth talking about.
Okay.
And, to me, it's another paradox. They're two equally true statements. I have been not surprised, but my one-on-one relationships with my direct reports, my ability to establish a team and create that level of fellowship has not been hindered by an inability to see people face to face. My team has never been in the same room together over the last 18 months.
Wow.
And I have met everyone at least once, but maybe once. So that's a big deviation for me. I was always, meeting with my direct reports face to face as either a team or individuals, for years. I have found that the ability to connect and stay connected has been seamless. I feel just as connected and engaged with my team as I ever would have. If I expand that, though, to say their direct reports or my expanded team, it's a much more challenging activity for me as a leader, and as a type of leader that I believe had a good pulse on my organization, had a good rapport with very large numbers of my employees. I've been hamstrung in my traditional techniques of how to do that. They no longer apply. I'm not going to be able to walk around and see somebody and engage them in some kind of meaningful dialogue. I can't just pop into a meeting and listen to how people are interacting with each other and engage. So it on one hand, I will say, yes, I don't feel as on top of the climate or the engagement of the larger organization as I would like to be. And I've also gotten to the point where it's time for me to stop saying that. I need to do something different. I need to learn a new way to have the level of engagement with the broader team. The fact that I can't do what I used to do is sort of water under the bridge at this point. It's time to do different things, whether they take more energy or whether they're not as natural. So be it. It's time to accept this new normal.
Yeah, it really is. I feel your pain as someone who, like you, counts on myself to interject humor and to have a little side comment or a little look that enhances the relationship, at least in my view. I've thought it enhanced the relationship, feeling the missing of that, and trying to make a joke on Zoom and having people not get it because there was just a slight pause in my delivery, which made it not funny. So there's a lot for us all to deal with, but I appreciate what you're saying is it's probably time to stop saying that. And move to the next thing. All right, Mike. Well, thank you for, I'm going to say it this way. Thank you for being someone who is actually committed to empowering leadership, to play on the title of this podcast, and that you're not just interested in that. You found that it's the way to be effective, and that's been, a key to things. So I really appreciate you coming on today and talking with us.
Doug, I absolutely appreciate it. I appreciate our relationship, and I'm glad to have had the dialogue.
Thank you for listening to Empowering Leadership. If you enjoyed this episode, take a moment to subscribe for free on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a rating and a review so that other leaders like yourself can find us. Sign up for Dorrier Underwood's email newsletter by visiting us at dorrierunderwood.com. Dorrier Underwood serves visionary companies who are serious about realizing their dreams and who are unwilling to settle for incremental results. Our clients are looking for breakthrough results and a deeper sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. To learn more, visit us at dorrierunderwood.com. That's it for now. Go forth and be amazing and take good care of your people. Empowering Leadership is produced by Dorrier Underwood and Andy Go of Gojo Studios.